He was the kind of man who thought the world revolved around his last name, until the night he drenched a waitress in pasta sauce in front of an entire restaurant. The next morning there was a knock at her door. Standing there wasn't the police or an apology, it was his father, a billionaire, holding a set of Rolls-Royce keys and an offer that would turn humiliation into the most unexpected revenge you've ever seen. But there was one catch. The waitress would be his boss, and for the next 3 months she could decide exactly how hard to make him pay. What happened over those months shocked everyone, including her. Speech balloon before we start, comment ready, if you love seeing arrogance get crushed, and make sure you subscribe now so you don't miss the ending. Trust me, you're going to want to see it. The clink of fine crystal echoed through the golden-lit dining hall of the Sapphire Crown, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, where guests in tailored suits and glittering gowns whispered about stock markets and summer villas in Monaco. Emily Carter, 24, moved between tables with the quiet precision of someone who had learned to hide exhaustion behind a professional smile. She carried a tray of steaming pasta toward table 7, where the notorious playboy heir, Adrian Blackwell, lounged like a king surveying his court. "Finally," he muttered without looking up from his diamond-encrusted phone. He stabbed a fork into the pasta, paused and frowned. "Cold," he declared, his voice dripping with disdain. Emily opened her mouth to apologize, but before a single word could escape, Adrian's hand shot forward. The plate, heavy porcelain rich with sauce, flew from his fingers, smashing into her uniform. Gasps rippled across the room as red sauce soaked through Emily's white shirt, dripping onto the polished marble floor. Conversations died mid-sentence and cameras rose in silent hands. "Keep the garbage," Adrian sneered, leaning back as if the act had been nothing more than flicking away an insect. Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to vanish. Instead, she stood frozen, every eye in the restaurant searing into her skin. The maitre d' approached, and instead of defending her, he whispered coldly, "Go home, Emily. Don't come back tomorrow." Outside, the air was sharp, the city lights blurring through her tears. She didn't know it yet, but this humiliation would ignite a chain of events no one in the Sapphire Crown could have predicted. A chain that would bring a billionaire father, a set of Rolls-Royce keys, and a lesson in humility no amount of wealth could buy. Speech balloon, what would you have done in Emily's place? Comment justice, if you believe arrogance should never go unpunished, and like this if you agree. Emily woke the next morning with a dull ache in her chest, the sting of last night's humiliation still clinging to her like the faint smell of tomato sauce that refused to wash out of her uniform. She had barely slept, replaying every second in her mind, the gasps, the cold dismissal, the way her manager had chosen silence over standing up for her. Rent was due in a week, her little sister's school fees were overdue, and now she had no job. She wrapped herself in a worn cardigan and sipped the last of her cheap instant coffee when a sharp, deliberate knock echoed through her tiny apartment. She frowned. No one visited her this early. Pulling the door open, she froze. Standing in the hallway was a tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, polished shoes gleaming, posture as rigid as steel. His silver hair caught the morning light, his eyes a piercing gray that carried authority without needing to raise his voice. In his hand, he held a set of Rolls-Royce keys, the iconic emblem glinting like a crown jewel. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his tone calm but cold. Emily's voice caught in her throat. "Yes?" "My name is Alexander Blackwell," he said evenly. "I believe you had an unfortunate encounter with my son last night." Her pulse quickened. She had seen his name in magazines, linked to billion-dollar mergers and skyscrapers that bore his family's crest. He extended the keys toward her but didn't let go. "I'm here to make this right," he continued, "and to ensure my son learns a lesson he will never forget." The weight of his words filled the hallway, making Emily's stomach twist with both suspicion and curiosity. Speech balloon, if a billionaire showed up at your door after wronging you, would you trust him? Comment yes for trust or no for doubt, and don't forget to like if you'd want to hear him out. The offer. Emily hesitated, her eyes darting between the gleaming Rolls-Royce keys and the man who held them with such deliberate calm. "I don't want his charity," she said finally, her voice sharper than she intended. Alexander Blackwell didn't flinch. "This is not charity," he replied. "It's accountability. My son humiliated you in front of a room full of people. You will answer for it. But before that, I want to offer you something that will change your life." Emily's brow furrowed. Offers from billionaires usually came with invisible chains. Alexander seemed to read her doubt. "I've already had my people look into your situation," he said matter-of-factly. "You've been juggling 2 jobs, supporting your sister through school and keeping a roof over your head. You've done more with nothing than my son has done with everything. His words, though factual, stung. "Here's my proposal," he continued. "You will become the director of a new charitable foundation I'm starting. Your salary will be $200,000 a year, with full health benefits for you and your family. The car is yours as well." Emily almost laughed. "You expect me to believe this?" "I expect you to decide whether you want to take control of your future," he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There is one condition, however." Her pulse quickened. "What condition?" "My son will work under you. Not in an office. In the very restaurant where he humiliated you. He will be your subordinate for 3 months, learning humility one dirty plate at a time. You will oversee his progress and report to me." Emily stared at him, torn between disbelief and the intoxicating idea of poetic justice. Speech balloon. "Would you take this deal just to watch the arrogant get humbled?" Comment: deal, if yes, or pass, if no, and like if you think consequences should match the crime. The first day Emily arrived at the Sapphire Crown with a sense of power she'd never felt before, though she kept her expression neutral. The maitre d' looked confused to see her but quickly stepped aside when he noticed Alexander Blackwell following behind, his presence radiating authority. The kitchen buzzed with the clatter of pans and the hiss of boiling water, but all motion seemed to freeze when Adrian walked in, wearing a plain white apron and a black t-shirt that looked nothing like his usual designer attire. His expression was a mixture of irritation and disbelief, as if the idea of manual labor was a personal insult. "Apron on, hands in the sink," Alexander instructed without ceremony. Adrian shot Emily a glance, expecting her to smirk or gloat, but her face was unreadable. "From now on," she said evenly, "you'll take instructions from me. That means every dish, every order, every complaint goes through me first." The staff exchanged glances, some hiding smiles behind their hands. Adrian picked up the first stack of plates, his manicured fingers trembling slightly as he lowered them into the steaming water. Within minutes, his face flushed from the heat, and droplets of sweat beaded along his forehead. The kitchen's usual chatter was replaced by the sharp commands Emily issued, not cruel but firm. "Rinse faster. Dry properly. You missed a spot." Each correction chipped away at his defiance. By the end of the first hour, Adrian's arms ached, his pristine shirt clung damply to his back, and the smell of soap mixed with the sting of humility. Emily didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The sight of the billionaire's son standing ankle-deep in suds was victory enough. Speech balloon. "If you were in Emily's place, would you push him harder or go easy?" Comment: push, or easy, and like if you think he's only just beginning to learn his lesson. Cracks in the armor. The second day began with Adrian dragging his feet into the kitchen. His hair unstyled, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. The novelty of the humiliation had worn off, replaced by a dull ache in his shoulders and a simmering frustration he could no longer hide. Emily watched him struggle with a mountain of greasy pans, her voice calm but firm as she reminded him to keep up. "You missed the spot again," she said, sliding a plate back toward him. He clenched his jaw but said nothing. By midday the other staff began testing him. Marco, a young server, accidentally spilled a tray of drinks near his feet, forcing Adrian to clean up the mess without complaint. In the past, Adrian would have barked orders or thrown money to solve the problem. Now, with Emily's eyes on him, he crouched silently and scrubbed. There was no applause, no thanks, only more work waiting. Later, when a customer insulted the kitchen staff over a delayed order, Adrian instinctively turned to defend himself but instead saw Emily absorb the criticism with quiet dignity. Something in her composure unsettled him. She was stronger than he'd realized. That night, as he washed the final dish, he muttered under his breath, "This is hell." Emily, stacking plates nearby, replied evenly, "No, this is reality." Speech balloon. "Do you think humility can truly change someone, or do they go back to old ways?" Comment: change or same. And like if you believe lessons can last forever. A small shift. By the end of the first week, Adrian's hands were red and raw, the skin between his fingers cracked from constant exposure to hot water and harsh soap. The blisters throbbed with every scrub, but he refused to ask for gloves, too proud to admit the pain. Emily noticed, though she said nothing, choosing instead to observe. On Friday evening, a rush of orders sent the kitchen into chaos. Shouts from cooks, the slam of oven doors, the constant ring of service bells. Marco dropped an entire stack of clean plates, the shattering echo cutting through the noise. The new manager stormed over, ready to unleash his temper on the young server, but before he could speak, Adrian stepped forward. "That was on me," he said quickly. "I bumped into him." The manager hesitated, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to argue with the Blackwell name, even in this diminished role. Marco glanced at Adrian with surprise. Later in the dish room he muttered, "Thanks man. No one's ever covered for me before." Adrian shrugged, uncomfortable under the weight of genuine gratitude. That night as he left the restaurant, he caught his reflection in the darkened window, apron stained, hair damp, eyes tired. For the first time in his life he didn't see an heir to billions staring back. He saw a worker. A small part of him wondered if that was such a bad thing. Speech balloon: would you start respecting someone after a single good deed, or would you wait to see more? Comment respect, or wait. And like if you think Adrian might be slowly changing. The visit 2 weeks into Adrian's punishment, Emily surprised him with an instruction that made his brow furrow. "Meet me outside after your shift," she said simply, offering no explanation. The evening air was cool as they stepped out into the nearly empty parking lot. Emily led him past the streetlights, her pace steady, her silence deliberate. "Where are we going?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "To meet the people your arrogance almost destroyed," she replied. 20 minutes later they turned into a neighborhood Adrian had never seen, cracked sidewalks, peeling paint, and the faint scent of cooking from small, cramped houses. They stopped in front of a modest home with a small garden, its fence patched with mismatched boards. Inside he was greeted by Emily's mother, a weary but dignified woman who welcomed him with a smile that carried no malice. At the kitchen table sat Emily's younger sister, Sophie, her legs wrapped in a blanket, textbooks open beside her. As they talked, he learned of late rent notices, skipped meals to pay school fees, and the constant struggle to stay afloat. Sophie beamed when Emily mentioned that her new job meant she could finally afford Sophie's medical treatment. Adrian listened quietly, the truth pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't shrug off. Speech balloon: would you forgive someone if they hurt you but then changed? Comment forgive, or never. And like if you think Adrian is beginning to understand a lesson in perspective. That night, Adrian lay awake in his small apartment, the images from Emily's home replaying in his mind. He thought about the golden chandeliers of the Blackwell estate, the imported marble floors, the rooms so large they echoed, and realized how little of that had ever made him feel anything. Sophie's smile, however, stayed with him. The next day at work he noticed things he had previously ignored, the quiet exhaustion in Marco's face, the way the older cook rubbed his sore back between orders, the dishwasher's limp from standing too long. When Emily caught him wiping down tables without being asked, she raised an eyebrow. "Trying to impress me?" she teased lightly. "No," he said, surprising himself. "Just feels wrong not to help." The truth was, something had shifted. The work was still grueling, but he no longer saw it as beneath him. That evening, as the shift ended, he handed Marco a fresh cup of coffee from the nearby cafe. Marco blinked in surprise. "Don't get used to it," Adrian said, but the corner of his mouth betrayed a smile. Speech balloon: do you think small acts of kindness can change a person completely? Comment yes or no. And like if you believe change starts small. The turning point: the third week brought an unexpected challenge. A wedding party had booked the restaurant, flooding the kitchen with orders. The atmosphere was tense, voices raised, plates clattering. Midway through the chaos, the new manager erupted at Marco for delivering an order late. Adrian, without thinking, stepped between them. "That was my station," he said firmly. "If you have a problem, take it up with me." The room went silent. The manager glared but backed off, muttering under his breath. Emily, who had been watching from the pass, felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected: respect. After service she pulled Adrian aside. "Why did you do that?" He shrugged. "Because no one stood up for you that night. I know how it feels now." It wasn't a confession of guilt, but it was close. She nodded slowly, realizing that the arrogant heir who had once drenched her in pasta sauce was starting to disappear. Speech balloon: would you stand up for a coworker even if it meant risking your own job? Comment stand or safe. And like if you believe loyalty is worth the risk. Confronting the past at the end of the month, Alexander Blackwell invited Emily and Adrian to a quiet meeting at his downtown office, a space that smelled faintly of leather and success. From behind his massive oak desk, Alexander studied his son with a calculating gaze. "I've been getting reports," he began, his voice even. "It seems you're improving." Adrian shifted in his seat, unsure whether to take it as praise or another test. "I'm just doing the work," he said simply. Emily, seated beside him, remained silent, curious about where this was leading. Alexander leaned forward. "Do you understand now why I put you there?" Adrian's eyes flickered toward Emily. "Because I didn't just embarrass her," he admitted. "I embarrassed myself. And I made our name mean less." Alexander nodded slowly. Names can be repaired. Character takes longer. He reached into a drawer and placed a thick folder on the desk, sliding it toward Emily. Inside were blueprints for a community center. "This is yours to run," he told her. Then to Adrian, "You'll assist her, as long as she allows you." Emily glanced at Adrian, weighing his sincerity. For the first time she saw no smirk, no defense. Just someone waiting for a chance to prove himself. Speech balloon, would you give him that chance or keep your guard up? Comment chance or guard. And like if you think everyone deserves at least one opportunity to make things right. Building together, the weeks that followed were unlike anything Adrian had ever experienced. Gone were the designer suits and effortless luxury. His days were now filled with hauling supplies, painting walls, and speaking with community members who had never heard of the Blackwell fortune. Emily watched his progress with cautious optimism. He still complained now and then, but he worked, and that mattered. One afternoon, as they reviewed plans for the center's kitchen, Adrian asked her, "Why didn't you just walk away after my father's offer?" Emily set down her pen. "Because if I did, you'd never learn. And maybe I'd miss the chance to see you become something better." Her words landed heavier than she intended, but Adrian didn't flinch. "Then I guess I owe you more than an apology." The opening of the center drew a small crowd from the neighborhood. Children laughed as they explored the play area, parents asked about programs, and volunteers handed out food. For once, Adrian didn't just stand in the background. He served plates, chatted with guests, and even knelt to tie a boy's loose shoelace. Emily caught herself smiling. Maybe, just maybe, he had earned her respect. Speech balloon, would you work with someone who once wronged you if they genuinely changed? Comment yes or no. And like if you believe in second chances. The final lesson: 3 months after the night that started it all, Emily and Adrian stood side by side outside the bustling community center they had built. The air was crisp, the building alive with the sound of laughter and conversation. Alexander arrived, watching them with quiet pride. "I think you've learned something," he said to his son. Adrian nodded. "That respect isn't given because of money or a name, it's earned every single day." Emily looked at him, searching for any trace of the man who had once humiliated her. All she saw was someone who had worked for her trust and against all odds earned it. "We're not friends," she reminded him. "But we're not enemies either," he replied. They shook hands, sealing a mutual understanding. As Alexander handed Emily the official documents making her the permanent director of the foundation, Adrian stepped back, content to let her take the spotlight. For the first time in his life, he didn't need to be the center of attention. He just needed to be useful. Speech balloon, do you think Adrian will stay this way or slip back into old habits? Comment stay or slip. And like if you think true change lasts a lifetime.